Welcome back everyone to I've Made a Huge Mistake. Today we are going to do some very simple stuff. We're going to fix my idiocy from our last little clip in which I drove the car around without the coolant being actually, or the upper coolant hose actually being tight, which blew off, and we can see that that's still blown off. I gotta reconnect it there. And then we're just going to fill it up with some good old Dexcool. So the first thing we got to do, this car doesn't have a burp procedure. Basically, you just gotta fill it up with coolant and then let it sit for 5 minutes and then check back in again. So we're going to start by fixing our problem on the block itself and reconnect those hoses, check all of our hose clamps so we don't have a problem. And then after that, we'll start filling it back up and maybe we get to take it for another drive. This clip actually has a little retainer on it, which I didn't realize before, that you gotta pop down to get it back out again. So take the screwdriver, stick it in there, and get it underneath. Come on, it's stuck open right now. I should be able to just push it down and it should release. And it's stuck. Oh, there it goes. Now we're nice and tight. All right, let's check our other hoses. Our other hose is down here, and it's underneath the charge pipe, and I did remember to snug that one up. So that's our upper. I never disconnected the lowers, so those are still good to go. Time to top it off. I also noticed that our super glue did not work for our crankcase recirculation or valve cover recirculator, so that's cracked again. I'll probably have to try some JB Weld or something along those lines, or maybe just put a little plate in here with an actual nipple and make sure that that works. But the good news is that is before the compressor side of the turbo, so it's not going to cause any problems right now. It's just going to mean that I'm going to have any positive pressure out of the valve cover is just going to come out of this hose and evacuate back to just the environment rather than back into the intake. We took the car for the initial test drive, and we did that with the air filter that was in it from the flood, which was pretty nasty. So I did go ahead and buy a fresh Wix filter here, and we're gonna go throw that in the car as well now. I probably didn't need it, but the one that was in there was pretty black and moldy. New filter versus old filter. You can tell that this one's quite a bit darker and gunkier. It's actually not that awful, but hey, for 20 bucks or whatever it was, I figured might as well replace it and make sure that there's no more gunk getting through this if this did have a tear or if it was soaked or anything like that, because this could have been completely underwater, probably was, and God knows what's stuck in that filter mechanism. So fresh one. Go in one way. No, it's universal, so what am I missing? There we go. Seated in there. The clip's out of the way. It's not seated right yet. There it goes. No, the front's not seated yet. What the hell? Ugh, all this because I'm being lazy. The cold fill procedure on this thing says just fill it up to the cold fill line and then let it sit for at least 5 minutes before checking again. and then fill it back up again, and do that until when it's sitting for a full 5 minutes at cold temperature. It's actually at the cold fill line, and then we start it up, get it up to temperature, and do the same thing one more time. It's actually been 5 minutes, and it doesn't look like our coolant has gone down at all, so maybe I didn't lose as much as I thought, or maybe it just needs to burp quite a bit once the car gets up to temperature. So that's the next thing we're going to do. We're going to take the coolant, keep the cap off the reservoir, fire up the car, and let it run for a little bit, get up to temperature, and then let it burp. It's going to take a little while to get the car up to temperature. I'm not going to rev it too hard or anything like that, because we still have bad oil, well, not bad oil, but not the right oil in it, and we don't know how wet that oil is. So for the first 100 miles or so, I'm going to take it easy and then do a proper real oil change with a fresh filter. But in the meantime, we're just waiting for the coolant to actually heat up, and the way we can tell that is we've got our upper radiator hose right here, and we can squeeze that, and basically if that starts to become hot, we know that our thermostat's open and working properly, and then we know that coolant's flowing through the system, and then we can check our expansion tank again and keep burping the system until we've got enough coolant in it. The other thing you want to do when you're burping a coolant system like this is turn your heater all the way on. So let's crank that all the way up in the car. That way it makes sure that your coolant is running through the heater system that's back here. Normally it's underneath here. And make sure that all those valves are open so that you don't have any airlocks that are stuck in there as well if air got caught in the system there. All right, we've let the tank run for a little while. It is up to temperature. Our upper hose here is nice and hot, and as we can see, warm coolant is getting into it from all the steam. Just set the cap on lightly right now, and then we're going to let it sit for 5 minutes, come back and check, and then fill it back up to that line, run it one more time, and then we should be good to go. While we wait for the car to cool off a little bit, wait for the coolant to drain in, one thing I also wanted to check is to see if the seat motor actually worked. I never bothered to check that. So we'll hook up a battery really quick to the leads, positive and negative, and see if it goes up and down. It should just be a forward-reverse motor, and I think it's just the height adjustment on the seat because everything else appears to be manual. So let's grab a battery, hook it up, and see what happens. I've got the seat motor here, and you can see there's two wires that go up there. Chase those back, and they're actually big fat red and black wire up here. So we're going to hit positive to the red, negative to the black, and then see if it actually turns this screw that should adjust the seat height. And if it doesn't, this motor's probably dead just from being wet, and we can see that it definitely got wet under here. But if it still works, hey, great, we got power seat until I get the racing seat in. I'm a tallish guy, so the way these seats sit by default or where they were stuck, and you can actually see it's a worm gear, and that worm gear has got quite a bit of travel left in it, and I want to bring that back down. So I think what I'm going to do is try to take this off, pop this pin out if I can, which looks like it's just a punch pin, and then there's also a clip up here, and completely remove this, which should bring the seat down all the way as low as it can go, and then I'll figure out if I can reattach it some way without the motor on there, so that at least when I'm in the car, it's comfortable and I'm not bumping my head against the roof. I got incredibly lucky here. I've discovered a little fatal flaw in the design of these things. If this motor is dead, and if when that motor dies, these seats are all the way down, there's no way to get a wrench on there to actually take the nuts off to actually remove the seats to fix it. It needs to be up an inch or two. So unless you have a very narrow wrench and very small fingers, you're not going to get in there to get that out. So for right now, I'm not even going to be able to put the rear rails back on with it dropped down all the way. That's okay. I'm not going to be racing this thing with this seat in it. It's just a way to move it around comfortably for now. The car went through a full heat cycle, and we can see we're a little bit below the line, so we're just going to fill it up a little bit more and then do one more heat cycle and see where it is. If it is good at that point, we're good to go. I did a little more research on the coolant system in this thing, and what I was doing is not working. I was never getting heat out of the actual car, which means that I definitely have an air pocket somewhere in there, and that's probably because this coolant reservoir wasn't high enough in the air. So what I'm going to do is disconnect this, which is just this little nut over here, and this little butt guy right here, and then I'm going to also disconnect this right here, because this is actually a return line that comes all the way across. And that should be basically the highest point in the motor. So if I do this right, when I lift up my reservoir with that hose off, I should see coolant squirting out of the top of that when there is no more air inside the motor. So let's give this a shot. Hear it burping in there. Hear it gurgling quite a bit. It's a little dark in here because I'm still in my garage, and I'm going to go ahead and put on my, oh, well, I guess it's not going to do much, but we'll put it on anyway. And we're going to go take this thing for a little test drive. I just burped the coolant system, made sure that it was all good to go, and I've been having it idle for a little bit. It's holding a good, safe temperature, so I think it's safe to actually go do a little bit of driving with. We're not going to go too far today. We still have that ugly oil in there, but we want to put some mileage on this thing just to kind of work that oil through, and then we'll do a proper oil change pretty soon here. Oh yeah, way down on power right now. motor's in limp mode, there is a lot of stuff, a lot of check engine lights that we'll have to pull after we drive it a little bit. Let's see. Well, it is a roadster, so let's make it roadsterish. I think it might be snowing right now, and just because that's the case, we might as well get a little Christmassy with it. Yeah, it is snowing. Merry Christmas, everyone. So I don't get a ticket with my car that has no insurance, missing panels off the side of it, no seat belts, no license plate, and is smoking heavily right now. But the smoke is from the coolant burn off from all the work we just did and spilled all over the place. Crank up the heat, let's go home. Whew! I found another quarter. That's 50 cents.